Cool. So good evening. Thanks for attending this wonderful occasion to speak about music. I'd like to begin by thanking the NYUAD Institute and NYUAD Acclaimed for hosting the lecture, the Arts Center and Bill Bragan for presenting my concert together with the music department, and in the music department, Matthew for producing the events within the department, and Gwyneth Bravo for inviting me and coordinating the entire residency. It's been a wonderful, very full and wonderful week here. In order to talk about recycling and cyclicism in music, we can begin by discussing exactly what that is and what we're dealing with. We're dealing with what is called absolute music, which is music which does not have a narrative assigned to it. It is not responsible to a narrative. It's not a story like an opera. It's not something like Berlioz' Symphonie Fantastique, which has a whole story behind it that the composer is trying to support, or that the narrative is sometimes in support of the music. It is, a listener can make up their own story in this kind of music if they would like to. This kind of music grew to require a structure and a frame in which to organize itself. And one of the larger structures that we have in the Beethoven Sonata and in the Liszt Sonata is what's called sonata form. And that is, in Haydn and Mozart, you had generally 3-movement sonatas. So you had a fast movement, a slow movement, and then a fast movement. And then in the string quartets and symphonies of Haydn and Mozart, and then in the Beethoven sonatas, you began to have 4-movement sonata structures. With a fast movement, the second and third movements could be interchangeable in terms of order. You might have a slow movement, kind of deep contemplative sort of thing, and then the third movement might be a dance, a minuet or a scherzo, which is called scherzo and trio, or minuet and trio form, and then the last movement would generally be a rondo. And those middle movements could be interchanged. Each one of those movements, the first movement and the second and the third, in general operate in what's called an ABA form. So you have an original set of materials. The B section would be a contrasting or developing that idea, and then there's a return to the A section. The last movement has something which is called a rondo often, which is A, B, A, C, A, D, A, B, A, abracadabra. So this is the kind of, but each movement was designed, the intention was to have original material, original ideas, original material in each movement. So as we talk about cyclicism, what we're talking about broadly is the use of a melody, theme, or motivic idea in more than one movement, an attempt to create a more cohesive structure. So cyclicism is going to be a theme that shows up later. It's kind of parallel and more developed sibling is thematic transformation, where there's an idea, a melody or theme that gets transformed, that it gets changed. The original transformer is probably Johann Sebastian Bach. And it was in his writing of fugues, which he was probably the premier composer ever of fugues. And a fugue is in many ways it seems like a complex form, but in other ways it's very simple. It comes from the Latin word fuga, which means to fly. And so the melody might start in the soprano, usually not too long of a melody, and that melody, we call it a subject, then flies to another voice. So it might start in the soprano, then fly to the alto, maybe then it flies to the bass, up to the tenor. And you can have 2, 3, 4 voice fugues, which are common, mostly 3 and 4. But Bach actually wrote a 6-voice fugue. Within these fugue structures, one of the things that Bach did to manipulate that subject was to sometimes turn it upside down, which is called inversion. He would also sometimes speed it up, which is called diminution by smaller note values. And sometimes he would have it go slower, augmentation, with larger note values. So if you think of something like, well, I'll sing it. Dum, bum, 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 bee, ba, 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 ba. So I have 3 beats here. Bum, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Augmentation would be one, bum, bim, bum, bim, bim, bum, bum. Diminution would be bum, ba, 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 bim, ba, 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 bum. So each one of those has a different feeling. And also if I were to invert it, and so dim, ba, 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 bum, ba, 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 bum, it's a different feeling as well. So that's sort of the basic outline of thematic transformation, which we'll hear largely in the Liszt Sonata, but you'll hear it also in the Beethoven in particular. All these composers wrote fugues. They're all in these pieces, but that's only a small portion of how they recycled ideas. Liszt said that Beethoven was the pillar of cloud and fire to lead composers by both day and night, so we'll start with him. Beethoven experimented a lot with the idea of thematic and transformation and motivic development. You can hear also cyclicism very strongly in his very famous Fifth Symphony. Symphony's famous for the opening, ba-ba-ba-bum, but there, in the last movement, there's a big portion of the third movement that comes back. But we're just dealing with, we don't have an orchestra here, so we'll just deal with some of the piano music. The first, there's a sonata that Beethoven wrote, Opus 27, number 1, which he called Sonata Quasi Fantasia, sonata kind of like a fantasy. And it's the first place that there's something of the idea of returning material that comes up. And it's kind of a technical matter in terms of why I don't quite call it cyclicism, because the material is kind of starts like that. And that's in what appears to be the third movement. And it seems like that movement ends, and then we get a very fast movement, quite contrasting, goes on for a while, and then this melody comes back now in a different key. And it's an extended, well, I call it an extended quote, comes back. But in music, we know the end of something of a piece or a movement by double bold bar lines that come down. It says, this is the end of this. And in that sonata, he has, at that moment that goes, what we would think from the third movement to the fourth movement, they're just very light double lines. So he's saying this is still kind of the same movement. The first sonata that has what we would really call a real cyclicism is the Opus 101 Sonata, which is the first of what we call the last five, big Beethoven last five piano sonatas. It begins like this. It goes on in the kind of lilting manner. That's the first movement. The second movement's very dramatic, very strong. So forth and so on. Not too long a movement. Then we get to the third movement, which is a very slow, quiet movement. Beethoven has marked this movement pianissimo, so it's very quiet. He's also marked it una corda, and this is a kind of technical thing about the piano, but it is material slightly, that Beethoven's piano, so most piano strings, so if I look at this piano, so from, I should know this, but I don't. Let's see, about there. So from here up to the very top, all the strings, each string of the piano consists of 3 strings. So I can, well, take another one. So I can, when you hear a piano tuner tuning the piano, sometimes you'll hear, if you ever hear it, you'll hear a kind of a pinched sound on a pitch. Well, that's a harmonic, sorry. You get that kind of pinched sound, and they stick something in so that they can tune each one of those 3 strings individually. On Beethoven's piano, one could shift from 3 strings to 2 string to 1 string, so that the sound would progressively get softer. Oddly, in our modern world, we can only shift 1 string on the piano. So we can go from 3 strings and press down this pedal to 2. And so where Beethoven writes una corda, we can't quite do it. Una corda meaning 1 string. We can get to due corda, we get to 2 strings, we can't get to 1. So when we see una corda, we have to think, okay, we put the pedal down, and that kind of sounds like that. And then I have to imagine that it's still, on Beethoven's piano, a third softer. So just, sorry. Very remote. Just kind of very, it just takes your breath away. And then he comes to the end of this music, and as he gets there, he writes little by little, all the strings. So you come out of the haze a little bit. Back to the very opening theme of the first movement. So he uses that opening material as a kind of transition from this very, I would say, very inner, confidential, intimate movement, and a little bit of light comes in through the reappearance of the opening material into the last movement. The next incidence of motivic development in Beethoven that's interesting across all of the movements is his monumental, you heard it here a couple of years ago, Hammerklavier Sonata. And in this case, it's motive is something like an idea. So in this case, this leap is part of the idea, and short long. So it's not like a gorgeous melody that you're going to go home and sing, but it's just this kernel, this nugget idea. So short long and the idea of the leap. And that pervades the movement in many different ways. The first movement, everything short, long, short, long, short, long. It's a long movement, it's a long piece, it's an incredible piece of music. It's a shame to run through a few things, but he does that all through that movement. Pa-pam, 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 short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. And usually in some kind of leap, so from low to high. There's a short bit of it in the second movement. The third movement is this incredibly beautiful, very, very long movement that has a very linear, expressive, singing and plaintive kind of quality to it. But even within that, he finds moments to do the same deed. And this usually in that movement is kind of inversion. So it's going down instead of up, but it's always deed, hum, pa-dee, pa-dum. He does that throughout the movement. The next moment of importance is the transition again to the last movement. And so you sense that this is an idea where before the last movement, he's saying, you know what, this is all of a piece. It's all from the same cloth, and he's letting the listener know, except always in very clever ways. So here we finish the first 3 movements, the transition to the last movement. So we have this octave leaps, And now instead of going up, it goes down. And it's, instead of being short long, it's long short. And then later, same thing, idea. And then to hammer it home, and then to begin the last movement, he says, well, now let's go back. Going up. So he turns it around. And then there's a fugue to close this last movement. And the opening measure of the fugue is, right? So he says, again, he's tying this opening idea with this leap, and it's also harmonically the same in terms of the breadth of it. It's a 12th, but it's basically a third relationship from B to D and F to A. And so he's tied together the whole piece, which is, that piece is 50 minutes long, so it needs a good bit of tying together. It's an amazing piece of music if you have a chance to listen to it. So now we come to the Opus 110 Sonata, which we'll go into in a little bit more detail. The sonata begins like this. So we start with, so this is a third relationship. We go down a third. Now we go up a fourth. And back down a third, up a fourth. And then what's in the bass? We have what I kind of call a mirror relationship in the bass. So the pitches here are C, A, D, B. In the bass we have A, C, B, D. Very hard to hear, but there it is. And now in the main body of the theme, we have a third and fourth relationships again. So we go up a third, up a fourth, then down a step, then again thirds, fourth, thirds. So this same intervallic relationship, we call it, is operating throughout the kind of two main materials for this movement. The other thing that Beethoven has done, so I'll play the development. And the development section is the middle section, the B section, where the composer is working out some of the ideas from the opening section. Beethoven at times would work out many different kinds of ideas from the opening. So his openings went from being this long to this long. And then he would say, I'm going to work out all these ideas in the development. And then he would sometimes develop them further in a place that was kind of novel at the time later in the coda. As he came into the later period of his compositional, of his life writing, he would have developments where he was focused on one idea. And so we had the opening theme was this. So this is the development. So one of the things that's present there is this steam, bum, bum, ba, bum, ba, ti, bum, bum, ba, bum, ba. And it continues, da, bum, bum, ba, ba, ba. And it's kind of a hypnotic, rhythmic idea. There's an absent, it's in three, so 1, 2, da, ba, 3, da, beam, ba. And that middle second beat of the first measure has nothing on it. It's passive, right? Nothing happens. T, 2, dum, nothing there. And then the second measure, we have team, bum. We have something on that second beat. So it's always absent, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I was really, in my work on the piece, emphasizing that. And it happens also in this melody here. The left hand is just your violas and cellos, and who cares? But not really. But anyway, but the tune here, there's nothing on that active on that second beat. Then 1, 2, 3, empty, and so then I started looking at places where Beethoven changes that. And there are two places, and one of them is at a very powerful harmonic spot in the movement, and the other is in the last three measures. And the last three measures are this. So just preceding it. So I would really try to show that beat to the active, and then at the end, then there's nothing where it should be. Sorry. So this is what he wrote. And I kept trying to find a way that the listener could hear it, and I thought, well, one of the ways that you can practice that is by doing what he didn't write. And so I spent time practicing, right, to try and feel the difference. And what I discovered, and I'm saying that I discovered this about, let's say, 18 months ago, and I've been playing this piece for over 20 years. And besides having played the piece for over 20 years, it's actually kind of, I'm fudging, it's probably closer to 30. I had many lessons on the piece, right? So I studied with a great teacher in Baltimore, Leon Fleischer, who's one of the legendary pedagogues, legendary musicians, frankly, in the world, and my teacher, Robert Weyrich, and I played the piece for master classes of masters, and nobody said, hey, by the way, in the middle of this measure is, it's buried. And so it should be a fourth, right? And we get this tritone relationship, which is a problem. It should be a fourth, and tritone is what's called the devil's chord, and it's all problematic. But there it is, right there at the end. And so, but I wouldn't have discovered it, I don't think, unless I'd been trying to work out the rhythmic thing. It's kind of interesting. So, second movement of the sonata, there's, in the middle section, we have again this fourth, third relation. Fourth down, third up, fourth down, third up, third, fourth. So the whole pattern there is based on thirds and fourths. There's a slow section that comes, and then we come to the fugue that begins to close, that begins to close the sonata, open the third movement. And the fugue subject is this, the melody. If you recall that last measure, right? So the same music. And if you think back to the opening, So we have the C, and then we have A. So the low note is A flat. So we go up to D, then E, then high note is F, and comes down to C. This is in the melody here. To D flat, E flat, to F, back to C. The fugue subject starts on A flat, high note of F, down to C. Okay, so he's constructed this from the outset, right? Oops. So the fugue goes, it's incredible, it's beautiful music. It disintegrates at some point. It's powerful and beautiful. It disintegrates, comes back to this slow material that opened the third movement that it's not part of this talk. And he comes out of that again with the same una corda, the super quiet sound. And we have a fugue, and instead of should be, if we go up, right? So we're in G major, so it starts on D, it should go up. When he's steady, he says, let's go down. So it's an inversion. Super quiet. Continues that way. Next voice. What's happening there? So twice as fast. Okay, that's fine. Twice as slow on top at the same time. Now the hands switch, twice as fast up top and twice as slow below. And now we're also going the right way, right? We're going right side up and not upside down. Faster still. Same idea. Right side up, upside down. And we come back then to the theme as we heard it before. But what happens in the middle there? Here, we have our tritone, the same tritone, D, G flat, and we now have the theme upside down, incorporating those tritones from the last measure of the first movement. Look at this as kind of, it's like a celebration of this theme. It's closing out. But even while he's in the middle of that, in the middle of that, he still has, in this figuration, totally lost. You'll never hear it, but it's right there. It's amazing. We've had, after the first measure and after the first movement where we've had the C to the A, we really haven't had that. The fugue subject leaves out the C, right? It doesn't start there. It just starts from the second note. Now at this spot, like 6 measures from the end, he says C, A, B. He comes back to it. So that's so until then, it's probably the most organically composed piece of music. And that was 1821, I think. Yeah, 1821. That piece was, Beethoven wrote one more piano sonata after that, which was his Opus 111. He wrote 3 together in a row, 109, 110, and 111. 111 has different principles. Anyway, so Franck, César Franck, this piece was written in 1884, begins like this. It's kind of rippling figure. Now he introduces new material. So F, in very close relationships, so it's very a stepwise relation, step by step, not we were looking at intervals, thirds and fourths before. This is all step. And then we have this dissonance that resolves, and we call that dissonance when it happens on what's a strong beat and it resolves an appoggiatura, and it means to lean in Italian. So we lean, and it's expressive, and it's kind of gently painful. Yeah? And we want it to resolve. Yeah? Another one. So this is one of the operative ideas is of these appoggiaturas. Okay, and then he goes back on, back to the 16ths a little bit. Thereafter follows another episode of the rippling figure. And it carries on. This is the Prélude, Choral, and Fugue, so the next movement goes into the chorale. So movement ends like this, 1 measure transition, and now we're into the chorale. And we have these, again, these little barbs of pain. We get a slightly processional feeling, but still. Now we have our true chorale theme. To include fourths as well. That's in C minor there. And then he has another interlude still with these all it goes on, and then we have the chorale theme again in F minor. And you notice in the bass line is a scale. It's very interesting. Very simple. And then there's another interlude, similar kind of quality, and then the final statement in E flat minor is huge. That's the end of the chorale, and now we go to the fugue, but there's a transitional area. Sounds like, right, starts. And again. So until then, every iteration of this idea has always descended, but now goes up. Goes up and up. Still up. Now down. The fugue subject. All down. So it's all coming down, very kind of a little bit gloomy, powerful music. And finally, you know, if it's been going down, we must have an inversion, and it's going to go up. So this time, upside down is up. Versus down. It's another section. So then there's a big statement of the subject. comes to an end, and this cadenza here, kind of free section. But you can still hear that motive goes down, goes up, and now down, and down again. Oh, haven't I heard this before? We have our chorale theme. Shows up in the middle of this fugue with the opening figuration, the ripple idea. So ripple with chorale. It's combining the prelude and chorale together in the middle of the fugue. What's happening there? We have chorale in the right hand, chorale coming in the left hand, so they're now in canon. Right? Actually, separated 2 beats. On top of that, superimpose the subject. Statement. Every statement has been, of the chorale, has always been in minor. Whether it's C minor, B minor, F minor, E flat minor. Finally we get to this place, he says, major. So, thank you. Thank you. Any questions? We're going to go into the list in a moment, but any questions so far about anything that, or definitions of word I've used that maybe needs clarification? Okay. So now we've looked at 2 pieces where we have an idea that the composer presents at the beginning, and it reappears, it recurs throughout the piece. But one could argue, say, well, in the second movement of the Beethoven, this material here has nothing to do with this fourth and third business that I talked about. Or the arioso, this very, it's part of the Beethoven Sonata also. Let's say, look, that's got nothing to do with that third and fourth business also. So the composer who wrote a piece where almost every minute of his 30-minute sonata is based out of the materials from the opening is Liszt. Liszt was a kind of complicated individual. He was a super virtuoso, so he expanded piano technique. So all of the early, not all, but the great early composers, so Mozart was a tremendous pianist, improviser. Beethoven, tremendous pianist, improviser. Chopin, obviously the same. Brahms was a tremendous pianist. And then we have Franz Liszt. And each one of those composers expanded piano technique, say they were good, they expanded technique like this. Liszt, went from floor to ceiling. He wrote things that, Beethoven wrote the Hammerklavier Sonata, and Liszt was the first person to really be able to play it. And then he wrote things that, were exponentially, hard to say harder than Liszt Sonata, but he had developments in piano technique that were unheard of to his time. And he would write things that were literally unplayable, and he would amend them so that they were kind of unplayable, And so, and he also was, he was a showman. He was the first person to play in profile, which makes sense with the instrument, but it hadn't been done before. But he thought, it was good for him and for looking at him. And he had a very complicated, larger-than-life life, and then ended his life as an abbé, as a monk. And but it's easy for people to have focused on his virtuosity, and he, in fact, said at some times that he, while he had these noble ideas about music making and fidelity to the score and the composer, that sometimes he just was ashamed to report that he sometimes played for the applause. So that might mean he played something faster, or something was like this. He played this to make it more dramatic and extravagant. And so it's been tempting for people to focus on that with Liszt. And so his great work, the Liszt Sonata, let me just pull out the score just in case, is full of technical virtuosity and requires a sturdy technique to play. I'm going to play a portion of the piece, the opening materials. So it starts quietly. Now we've got octaves. Octaves are a big thing for virtuoso piano technique. Now we've got left-hand figuration. Now I'm going to show how good my arpeggios are. Good left hand. I'm really good, yeah? Very good, very good, very good. So, music goes on, and finally we, let's see, comes back, let's see, we'll finish this passage. I can also play beautiful melodies. Very touching. So, rich in variety and melodic material, and plenty of chance to show one's chops. In fact, it's a very small amount of musical material that he's used ingeniously. So these octaves, well, actually, sorry, we start with octaves here, right? And then we have a scale down. These kind of punctuation chords, another scale down. That's in fact one idea. Then we have that's the next idea. This relationship from a step down and then these thirds. And then another one, step down and then the thirds. Now we have the next idea. This 4-note repeated motive. And that material comprises about 80% of the piece, 85% of the piece. The next music here. Just passage work? No. Which comes from, sorry. So, next one. Next. So it's all from that. So one has to approach it. It's all expressive. And on this, again, same idea. And so instead of poppy, same. And again, motive. Our four note motive again. Come here with the left hand, which is, right, you would never hear it, but, and what's in the right hand? And four note motive here. So within this is where sort of you might say the movement proper begins. We're finally arrived to B minor, which is the movement of the piece. In these two measures, we have everything that we heard in the first 18 seconds, maybe, put together. Still developing. And again, motivic clearly. And again, expressive. Basically, he's saying here with these octaves, like, in case you missed it, this is what this piece is about, right? He doesn't, just keeps going. Always this interval. So still ti ta ta ta. It is difficult, but it's all this from this motive, yeah? What do we have here? Same as the opening in the scale. So on the beat. Now comes the scale. Now this just gets developed. This is the next big main material. This is the first new material since the opening. Hear this inside voice, so we have the resolution, but this inside voice reminds me of this, of the Franck. Franck probably stole it from this. There's an expression that good composers borrow and great composers steal. So I think Franck was well aware. Presents the theme. And now this beautiful melody is still the same thing. Same again. Our four-note motive. He's telling us now we have the four-note motive differently. Oh, whoops. So yup, up, becomes. So something that was very aggressive and menacing becomes something that's peaceful and questioning, maybe. And then he combines that with the are still so at every moment he either has one of the ideas present, but often he has two working at the same time and differently. So the next passage that comes up up here, we have the scale idea combined with the, okay, and coming up after that we have more octaves. But that's the scale 3 times as fast, and instead of going down, it goes up. So, and this, dee-da-da-da-da, same idea. So all of that goes on, and then again, a big virtuosic passage, and you come out of it again in every passage where. So completely by this delicate accompaniment is still the same. It's had another transformation, if you will. So the piece goes on quite much the same way. Every place you turn, you have these same ideas. So the piece is in one full movement, one played nonstop. They're generally regarded as 4 movements. Some people would argue 7, but where you have the second movement begins with this material here, which is now basically the last theme that's presented. So out of that we get our 4-note motive again. Now this is marked dolcissimo, as sweetly as possible with the most intimate sentiment, and it's triple piano. So piano is soft, pianissimo is as soft as possible, and pianissimo is don't play at all. material again. And we come back to this original, and there's a little bit of this is a build up towards the climax of the piece. Yes, again, two ideas going. Stays with the 4-note idea, and then we have the end. We have of this section of the slow movement, like he has the punctuation notes and then the scale going down. And now what do we have? Take a wild guess. A fugue. And this is what would be the scherzo, right? The third movement. Four-note motive together with the deep-bottom motive, and then going back and forth inside, this 4-note motive goes between the right hand and left hand. And here, what has to come? Inversion, upside down. Everything, so this dee-da-da-dee instead of da-da-da. Composers are so boring. They always use the same ideas, right? But it's amazing. I can't remember where I am. There we go. Goes on, and we come back eventually to the opening material again. And this is our return back to in the overall form, we've had our A, B, kind of A, B, A, B, C, A. We're back at A. He combines again. For instance, here, we have the same idea here, and then combined with the scale. Fast. There's the same idea, but now it's very hard to play. My great octaves again, but always motivic. 4-note motive. Opening, it was marked grandioso, fortissimo, very loud. Here it's mezzo forte, and we have this kind of harp rolling and this very luminous. I wish I could play it all again for you, but we don't have time for that. The piece is coming to an end. He has more of the scale idea. And we have virtuosic octaves again, but with the theme. final statement of this beautiful melody here, our last melody that showed up. And shortly thereafter, we have the last statement of our four-note motive disappearing. Now we're going to have our last statement of the whole piece. It's been this for the whole piece for half an hour. The final statement, he says, chords. And the scale. Scale has 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Eight.